The Dynamite King. One day, an inventor named Alfred Nobel read in the newspapers that he had died. Nobel knew this was a mistake, for he was very much alive. It was his brother who had died, and the newspapers got the two men mixed it up. But Nobel was very upset. It was not the story of his death that was so disturbing, but what the newspapers wrote about him. They described him as a rich man who had made his fortune by inventing dynamite and other explosives. This troubled Nobel because he knew it was true. He was a genius who invented arms and explosives. He not only invented deadly weapons but manufactured and sold them, which made him one of the richest men in the world. Yet, there was another side to Alfred Nobel. The inventor of dynamite wrote poetry and loved peace. He once called war the horror of horrors and the greatest of all crimes. When he really died, he did not want to be remembered for what he had done for destruction and war. He wanted to be remembered for what he had done for humanity and peace. Alfred Nobel was born on October 21st, 1833, in Stockholm, Sweden. When he was 9 years old, his family moved to Russia, where his father Emanuel was making explosives and weapons for the Tsar, the ruler of the Russian Empire. Alfred had gone to school in Sweden just for 1 year, and he never ran again. In Russia, he and his two older brothers had a tutor, but before Alfred was 17, he gave up his studies to join his father's business. One of the many things he soon learned was that people who make money from war do not like peace. When the Crimean War ended in 1856, Russia stopped ordering weapons from the Nobel family. Emanuel Nobel lost his fortune and returned to Sweden, where Alfred later trained him. In Sweden, father and son experimented with explosives. Some years earlier, an Italian chemist had mixed nitric acid and glycerin. The result was nitroglycerin, a highly explosive liquid. It was very powerful, but very unstable. Sometimes it blew up when it wasn't supposed to, and other times it didn't blow up at all. The Nobels tried combining nitroglycerin with gunpowder to make shells for the Swedish army. It was Alfred who figured out the mixture that worked. Then he borrowed money and bought a house next to his parents' home. He turned it to a laboratory to experiment with nitroglycerin and to make explosives for sale. Sometimes Alfred's younger brother, Oscar Emil, helped in the laboratory. One day, in 1864, the building exploded with a war. Alfred wasn't there at the time, but Oscar Emil was one of the 4 persons killed by the blast. His brother's death did not stop Nobel's experiments. When Stockholm officials said he could no longer work in the city on something so dangerous, he moved his laboratory to a barge anchored in the middle of a lake. Although some people were frightened by Nobel's inventions, others saw how useful nitroglycerin could be for blasting away rock and soil and building mines, roads, tunnels, and canals. Others came in from all over the world, but many of those who used nitroglycerin did not know how dangerous it was. A careless bounce or too much heat could cause a fearful explosion. There were many accidents, and a number of people died. Nobel said it wasn't his fault if people were careless, but it really was. He was so eager to sell his known product that he hadn't bothered to make it safe first. Even one of his own nitroglycerin factories blew up. People began to call Nobel a murderer and a criminal, and some governments forbade the use of nitroglycerin. Nobel was forced to find a way to make nitroglycerin safe or lose his business. He mixed it with a certain kind of earth called kieselguhr, which absorbed the nitroglycerin and made it stable, so it would not explode until it was supposed to. The new product was called dynamite. Dynamite made Nobel rich and famous, but it did not make him happy. He traveled, read, spoke 5 or 6 languages, and wrote poetry and plays, but he had few friends. Like many rich men, he was not sure whether people liked him or his money. He never married. Instead, he lived most of the time in a large empty house in Paris, France, with his servants and his dreams. For he did have dreams. He dreamed of a world where scientists would help men and not destroy them. He wanted to be such a scientist, but somehow he always came back to making explosives and weapons. It is rather fiendish things we are working on, he told one of his assistants. He said that his weapon was invented that was so powerful enough to kill everyone at once. There would be no more war. But meanwhile, he kept inventing and selling less powerful weapons, and wars continued. The waste and horror of war upset many people besides Nobel. One of them was his friend Baron Bertha von Suttner, who was active in an organization that wanted to set up an international court to settle quarrels between nations. Baron von Suttner asked Nobel to give his fortune to the cause of peace. This was an idea that Nobel had been thinking of ever since the newspapers had printed the story of his death in 1893. He made a will which left part of his wealth to science and peace. In 1895, he wrote another will which went much further. A year later, on December 10, 1896, Alfred Nobel died. Because of his second will, Nobel would be remembered not for what he did when he lived, but for what he did when he died. Almost all of his huge fortune was to be used to set up 5 awards. These awards were to be given each year to those persons who shall contribute most materially to benefiting mankind in 5 areas: physics, chemistry, medicine, literature, and peace. Since 1901, the Nobel Prizes have been awarded annually on December 10th, the anniversary of Alfred Nobel's death. The winners receive money, a gold medal, and a diploma. In return, they are required to give a speech or lecture. Nobel Prize is one of the highest honors a man or woman can receive. The most important is the one that is given for peace. Some people do not care much about physics, chemistry, medicine, or good books, but the whole world cares about peace. The man or woman who helps bring peace to the world gives mankind his greatest gift.